Representative of Switzerland to the WTO. Thank you to all of you for being here. You know how much we like trade and intelligence, trade and market intelligence tools. We are geeks. We love these tools that started with trade, then went into procurement, into investment, into export potential, and of course you know very well our standards map, the tool that gathers private sustainability standards. What we want today is to launch a new tool, but not just any tool. It's called Sustainability Map, and it's a tool that we want to associate with good trade. Not just trade, but good trade. Now, you will tell me no one wants to promote bad trade, but I just came from a session on illicit trade, so there is plenty of bad trade out there. So on good trade, what we want to do is essentially build a better understanding of sustainability across the entire value chain. Give a tool to governments, but not only governments, to companies, but not only the big ones, also the medium, the small and the micro, but not only companies, also consumers, a means to better navigate this issue of sustainability. In a nutshell, what we want to do is connect the dots, connect silos that for too long have been operated separately. And obviously, this sustainability map that we are launching today is something that ITC brings to you, but behind ITC there is a big support for this tool. It's called Switzerland, that has been since the very beginning an early believer in our work on sustainability, and this is why it's not me who will launch the tool, but it's the Swiss permanent representative to the WTO, Didier Chamboet. I want to, Didier, talking to you, but through you to the entire Swiss family, SECO and the numerous branches of Switzerland that have taken a keen interest on this issue, to thank you for having put your money where your mouth is, and having put more specifically your money in ITC is something we appreciate. We hope that with this new tool we are launching right now, you will be able to also take a lot of credit for a lot of work that has gone into this area of sustainable trade, sustainability. We do this together with you. We do this also together with other partners, with the European Union. We do this with Germany. We do this with many others, but this in particular is thanks to you. So Didier, floor to you.
Thank you very much, Arantxa, for your introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be present here today and to take part in this important forum, which brings together key stakeholders involved in ITC's Trade for Sustainable Development program. It is a most valuable occasion to gain insight in the current trends and perspectives of the highly dynamic field of sustainability standards. And I am also especially pleased and honored to participate in the launch of the new sustainability map, which is poised to become a key instrument of ITC. The Swiss government is a proud and committed partner of the T4SD, so T4SD stands for Trade for Sustainable Development, so I'm going to use this acronym in my speech, so just remember that T4SD means Trade for Sustainable Development. So I am repeating, this government is a proud and committed partner of T4SD since the program beginnings in 2009. This is why last year we just renewed our partnership for the coming years until 2020 as part of our Transparency and Innovation of Sustainability Standards program. This program is jointly implemented by ITC and the ICIL Alliance. With this engagement, we want to highlight the fact that private voluntary sustainability standards can be an effective and powerful tool to strengthen sustainability along global supply chains and become a vital mean to support the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. On the other hand, we have to be aware that compliance with the requirements of private so-called voluntary standards, and in my speech it is in quotation mark, voluntary standards, often proves to be challenging and costly for many exporters from developing countries, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises. Numerous studies have found that trade costs for developing countries are overall still considerably high. As a consequence, developing countries are often priced out of supply chains, and their participation in global and regional value chains remains a challenge. In this perspective, the work of ITC and its flagship program T4SD is an important contribution to reducing the cost of compliance with standards and to increasing transparency, efficiency and harmonization. One of many examples where the T4SD tools apply is the basic guideline for sustainable cocoa producers in Colombia. As these sustainability criteria were incorporated in the ITC Standards Map portal, local producers have been able to perform self-assessments that allow them to improve their practices before starting an official certification process. This self-assessment, which has been made possible through the ITC tool, has greatly improved their preparation for compliance and their ability to communicate with local and international buyers. In total, over 30,000 small farmers will have benefited from minimized transaction costs and increased their market access potential. We are convinced that with the launch of Sustainability Map, we will bring T4SD to the next level by using Sustainability Map. All actors along the value chain can take informed decisions on sustainability standards and lower the transaction cost. They will be able to communicate more directly from farmers in the developing world and intermediate processors and traders to the ultimate buyers such as retailers and brands. With the launch of the Sustainability Map, the T4SD team of ITC demonstrates its ability to continually develop its tools and partnership to respond to the dynamic development in the field of private voluntary standards. The Swiss government applauded the launch of Standards Map 1.0 in 2011. It also applauded the launch of the 2.0 version of the instrument in 2014 and is now pleased to applaud the launch of the 3.0 version in 2017. A major asset of the T for Sustainable Development, or the Trade for Sustainable Development initiative, has been in the past and will be in the future its neutral position on sustainability standards and its global public goods nature, which makes it possible to impact a wide range of actors in a positive way. The Swiss government is very happy to continue this exciting journey together with ITC, with you, Arantxa, with your team, and with our core donors. By the way, we would welcome more partners to join the Sustainability Map. We believe in this project, it's a good project, and please, if there are any representative of development cooperation agency in this room, take a look into this. Please ask questions to the managers of the program. Please ask for, I don't know whether you have a mock-up version of this, certainly you have, you do, Arantxa, so please ask for a session with the ITC people to take a look at the instrument and to have a more intimate knowledge of what it does. I'm sure it's an instrument worth supporting, and as I said, it's poised to become a very important instrument of the ITC. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Arantxa, for your introductory remarks. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Greg Sampson. I'm the Solutions Architect of the Trade for Sustainable Development program. Before I go into doing an actual demo of the system, going live into the system, I really want to emphasize that this is a team effort. I really want to thank the entire team, and I especially want to thank the IT colleagues, Christophe and Bru, who have been working very long hours over the last few months to make this available. And also I want to thank my colleague Bruce, who will be my co-pilot during this session. He will be the one navigating the website, so I'll be blinking a bit weirdly at times. Don't worry, I'll just be giving him some instructions. So Sustainability Map is the result of years of learning and experience springing from T4SD partnerships with various public and private sector organizations. And as was mentioned, it really represents the next step of the T4SD program. The website is available at sustainabilitymap.org. We're going to be launching it after this session, so please don't go all on your website, on your mobiles, you know, and taking all the bandwidth. I'll really need it for this session. It's freely accessible. It's part of the suite of ITC tools, Trade Map, Market Access Map, Investment Map, Procurement Map, and Export Potential Map. Sustainability Map incorporates or brings together existing platforms that most of you already know, the Standards Map and the Sustainability Exchange. But it also adds two new modules. It adds the Sustainability Network and the Sustainability Trends module. So here you can see the new Sustainability Map homepage, a new tool, new design, new homepage and branding. The homepage really aims to show the focus on the SDGs that the program essentially has. And if we scroll down a little bit, you can also see the various stakeholders that the platform addresses. So really the business sector, public sector, consumers, and standard-setting organizations. And really from the onset, we're trying to build this journey by enabling users to click on any of these icons and showcasing the various steps and the various features that they can get from the system. So if I was to select and click on business, they can learn how to become more sustainable. They can create an online business profile, generate some real-time sustainability analytics, monitor and track the sustainability of their given suppliers, connect with other businesses, and really keep up to date with sustainability market trends. In order to navigate this platform, there are two ways you can go about. The first one is the public view. That is to say, you actually navigate through the modules that are represented at the top of the screen. There is the standards, the network, the trends, and the community modules. Or you can actually log into the system. And this is very revolutionary in the sense that you no longer have to click around the platform trying to find what information is of interest to you. If you create an account, we bring the relevant information right to your dashboard, right to your doorstep. And this is extremely important. So I'm going to do the demo with two journeys. The first one, I'm going to click through each and every one of those modules, showcasing what are the main features. And then we're actually going to be creating an account together to show you how information can be displayed. So if I click on the first module, Standards, here I'm really accessing the Standards Map with the new version of the Standards Map. As was mentioned, we launched version 1 in 2009, version 2 in 2014, and this is very much the version 3 that provides new functionalities and ways of analyzing the 230 plus standard initiatives that we have in the system. In the new version, we have really kept the navigation and user experience as close as possible to the current version and provided those new functionalities that I'm going to be detailing right now. So once the user arrives on the new standards map, they arrive on an identify page. And what they really need to do is identify which of the 238 initiatives we have in the system are really relevant to them. When we first launched version 1, we only had 30 standards, so it was quite simple. Now we have a much larger array of initiatives. So we have included some additional filters, so you can filter by type, be it private, public, or international initiatives. You can still keep the product or geographic scope perspective. That is to say, I could enter the name of a product, such as mango, and the list of standards would be refining. Enter the name of a producing country, Colombia, in which case I would only have the standards that pertain to mango producers in Colombia that would be listed on the platform, and then I could add a destination market such as Switzerland to really see which are the standards that are being retailed in that given market. So now we're down to 33 standards, which is still quite a lot. So what we've done is we've tried to provide quick scans about those initiatives. So if you click on any of those standards, let's click on the Buy Swiss one, for instance, you get a quick scan. You really get a snapshot of what this standard is, you know, the official mission statement, key features, facts and figures to really get an understanding as to what it is. Then if you scroll further down, you can review the requirements of the standards. What are the sustainability criteria that are actually being addressed by that given standard initiative? You can review the environmental, social, economic, quality, or ethics hotspots, and you can also review the focus, the overall breakdown of those criteria. So here you can see that this initiative really focuses on environment and social, and not so much on economic, quality, and ethics. And then you have a set of other graphs that supplement this information. If you scroll down the page, you also get some very detailed information about the specific criteria that are being covered by this standard initiative. So if you click on soil general principle or soil erosion, let's say, you will see that this criteria is being covered. You can see the type of degree of obligation, degree of criticality, and you also get information from the standard document that actually informs the user as to what would need to be done in order to comply with the requirements equating to soil erosion. If you scroll up a little bit on the page, we also have information on the processes of the standard. So that's the modus operandi of the standard, how it's developed, how it's governed, how it's implemented, etc., etc. So this is the quick scan. This really provides you with a snapshot of the standards initiative. So now I'm going to go back to the identify module, and I am going to select BioSwiss, standards for import, and I'm going to select another standard such as Fair Trade International Small Producers Organization, and I am going to click on the detailed analysis. And here I'm going to be comparing the standards side by side. And the beauty of the standards map is that those standards might be talking in different languages, and we really bring them down to a common playing field where you can compare them side by side. And in order to run your comparison, you can compare those standards based on some requirements or based on some processes. And this is where there has been the most changes in the system. And the most changes are based on the learnings that we have collected from our various partners, and also the analysis and deliberations which we conducted in partnership with our technical working group. So before, we used to have a methodology that would really look at the number of criteria that would really demand it, so to speak, by those standard initiatives, whereas now we look at relative perspective. So we compare standards one against another. And there are different comparison modes which you can run. First of all, you can compare based on all of the standards that you selected, so the BioSwiss and the Fair Trade, and really focusing on those criteria that are covered by at least one of the standards. So you can click on See Results. You will get a chart that will showcase the percentage of criteria that are covered by the given standards on the review. And these are percentages. If you click on Environment, you actually get detailed information as to how certain criteria are being addressed on the soil, forest, inputs, biodiversity, etc., etc. Just to give you a really quick interpretation of this chart, if you look at soil, you can see that BioSwiss has 100%, which means it might cover 10 criteria. And if you look at the second column, you see that Fair Trade International has 70%, so maybe it covers only 7 of these criteria. But that's not the end of the story. What you need to do is scroll down a bit and really make use of that table, because this is where you get the information. This is where you see which of those criteria are being covered. You can see the ones that are not being covered by Fair Trade International. These are being represented by red crosses. And for each and every one of those points, let's click on soil erosion again, you can see whether it's an immediate, it's something that is requested within 3 years, whether it's a major, whether it's a minor requirement, you can really obtain very detailed information as to the actual requirement that is demanded from you. And also if you click on the more information here, you get even more information that is being provided, with which standard document was used in order to collect this information. So it's a lot of data. It's a lot of fun for standard geeks. So then moving on to the comparison mode, there are other ways in which you can run a comparison. You can also set a given standard as a specific reference. You know, so if you were to say, can you select a specific standard as a reference? Great. If you were to select a BioSwiss standards, click on See Results, scroll down a bit. There you would really have your BioSwiss. That is your benchmark. That is the 100%. And then you could compare side by scrolling down a bit, which are those criteria that are covered by BioSwiss and which are also covered by Fairtrade SPO. And this can be really important if, let's say, a producer was already Fairtrade SPO certified and wanted to eventually become also BioSwiss certified, because they can really see the potential gap and really go into the comparison side by side as to what would be the extra requirement that would be demanded from them. If they can scroll up a bit. And then one of the last main features that we have is the comparison based on a specific sector. So before we had that absolute analysis, so you could be comparing standards that focus on agriculture, others that would be focusing on agriculture, but you would be comparing pears and apples. Whereas now we can really focus the lens of the analysis by saying, listen, I want to review the information based on the criteria that pertain to agriculture, or only agriculture. And this is, there again, one of the new features of the system. If we move on to the second tab, the second way in which you can really compare those standards, you can take a look at the processes. And there again, that's the modus operandi of the standard, and you can review what's the difference assurance, claims and traceability, scheme management, and standard setting of the different standards on the review. And if you scroll down a bit, furthermore, you also have some very detailed information that is provided to you. So this is it for the standards component. Some of you may be wondering, hang on, what happened to the self-assessment? Because in the former version of Standards Map, I was mentioned earlier on, you can select a standard and conduct a self-assessment, an online questionnaire you respond to, and then we provide you with information as to how close or how far you may be from being compliant to a given standard, just an approximation, right? This is available further on in the website, and I'll be showcasing this in just a few minutes. So now moving on to the next module, network. This is completely new. It's a virtual network which enables users to share the business and sustainability profiles with traders, buyers, standard organizations, financiers, and other actors across the value chain. You can think of it as a LinkedIn, for small producers. The network to date has information on approximately 870 companies, so we're just launching today, but we have already been working with 2 partners in order to collect some data. As was mentioned by Mr. the Ambassador, we've been working with LBCS, which is T4SD and Swiss Contact Colombia partnership, which essentially has been developing a standard for small cocoa farmers, both for producers and organizations. And up until now, we have collected self-assessment for 1,000 farmers. And we have made those self-assessment and the information about those farmers available on the network. Over the course of the next few months, we'll be working towards including information for up to 5,000 to 6,000 farmers, but this number can also scale up. We have also collected information from our partner Lorica in Colombia and GS1 Colombia, and we will have our colleague Vivian have a few words about this at the end of this session, a little testimonial, so to speak. Just to say also that we aim by the end of 2018 to have 200,000 companies onto the system. We have already been talking with various partners who have shared a lot of interest into bringing their data onto the system, and we will also make sure that all of the ITC agricultural related projects also include their data onto the sustainability map. So now let's take a closer look at the network, what it does and how it works. So you can actually navigate the network in different ways. You can see a map with the 864 number. So Bruce, I will invite you to click on it. And these are actually the GPS locations of those cocoa farmers or other ag projects, ag commodities that we have that have provided the GPS of their farms, of their plots of land. So if you keep on clicking, Bruce, go for it. You can click on an individual point and you get a very quick snapshot of that given producer. So you get the name of the producer, the products and services, the country, the city, and the company type. This is just a little teaser, but if you really want to see more information, we're not going to do this now, but you could click on See Public Profile. Then you can also navigate this network and potentially, really identify those given businesses you want to link with by making use of a set of filters. So you can search a company based on a name. So if you were to search for a company called Sustainability ABC, which is just a test account, you then get one company that is being returned to you out of the 870. It produces cocoa based in Colombia, existing certification fair trade SPO. If you were logged in as a user, you could send them an email and you could get in contact with them. And we'll see that getting an account on the system is extremely quick and extremely easy. But if you click on the yellow icon, you can click the public profile, of that company. And we return information pertaining to the company's information. So we generate a little QR code, which those companies can put on their products. And if you QR code it, you would get to this page. There's information about the business name, description about its operation, contact details, if it has any social media, business size, information about the products that it produces, some more information, the information about the existing certification, such as the validity period of the existing certification, location of their company, and information about the fields, their assets. So if you click on the action, scroll down a bit and zoom in, you can see that this company is based in this given location. And with the use of the system, you can actually trace out the boundaries of a given field, and you can have multiple locations, multiple fields. And then for each of those fields, you can say what has been produced, whether it's been certified or not. So some of you may be wondering two things. First of all, data privacy. How do we deal with data privacy? And the second thing, data collection. So in terms of data privacy, all of the data that we collect belongs to the farmer. And we get the green light from the farmer to actually share this information. In certain instances, working with other partners, such as cooperatives, who do not want to share information about their farmers, we can also anonymize some data sets. When it comes to data collection, you can essentially collect information in the system in two ways. You can self-register, as I'll be showcasing in just a few minutes, or you can import data and collect data in the field making use of tablets. And this is what we have done with LBCS. Okay, so we had several tablets with the Sustainability Map app running onto them, go to the field, collect the data, click on a button, and everything is synced to our database. This is one of the ways in which we can engage with partners. The second way in which we can engage with farmers is upload of data. We've been talking with a lot of partners. We also have a USA project that is going to be making use of this system. We've been talking to a lot of rice producers in Cambodia and cooperatives, and they have already a lot of information which they can upload in Excel spreadsheets, pre-populate some data sets, and make them available on the network. So now I'm going to be transitioning to the third module, which is the trends. And the trends offers access to an extensive overview of production, related market information on over 10 voluntary sustainability standards, including the entire ICL membership, and numerous product groups such as cocoa, coffee, tea, palm oil, sugar, soy, among others. It's worth mentioning that this is a beta of the website. Okay? It's going to be finalized over the coming weeks, but all of it is essentially based on a publication, which I'm showcasing here, the State of Sustainable Markets, which is a joint effort between the Research Institute of Organic Agriculture and the International Institute for Sustainable Development, and it's supported by SECO. But as you can see, it's quite a heavy book, and it essentially has a lot of graphics into it. And what we've done as part of this trends module is we've enabled the users to select a given standard. Bruce, make a pick. Fair Trade International. And then you can see the type of information that we have on the left-hand side for that given standard. And then you can click on Show Data, and we start generating information pertaining to the certified area for all of the products of fair trade between 2011 and 2015. You see, we've been listening to the results of the mini hackathon that took place yesterday. We said you needed information about market trends, so this is really information that is extremely useful. You can also select one of the commodities of fair trade, Bruce, cocoa, and then you further narrow down, to look at the fair trade, cocoa certified, top 10 countries by area for 2015, click on Show Data, and we show the information that is made available. Now moving on to the last module, the fourth module, this is the community module. And this is really aimed to be the more kind of Facebook approach, where it's community-based. And here we're leveraging the information from one of our existing platforms, which is called Sustainability Exchange. And what we make available is information on training materials. So we have information on over 1,200 training materials. You can also access some expert profiles, sustainability expert profiles on the system, access a calendar of training and events that are related to sustainability. There's a set of forum discussions and negotiations you can access, and also some latest news. So if you were to scroll at the top of the page, you can select the product, mango, against which you initially ran your analysis. And then the information on the rest of the page will be filtered out. So out of the information that we have, in terms of training material, let's say, we've got information on mango bacterial disease, some training videos, some guides that were put up by Cody ACP on mango organic farming, etc., etc. And if you click, let's say, on the third link, Bruce, mango from organic farming, you then get a little abstract and you get a direct link to that given publication. Going back to the community and resetting the list of filters, you can also scroll down and access the potential list of experts and use some more advanced filters to filter out the service specialization, expertise of the experts that we have on the system that could potentially also assist in terms of becoming more sustainable. So let's take service specialization. You can take an inspector, and here you see the list that updates. And you can click on any of those, Andreas Nolle, for instance, and you take into the personals page where they provide with information, contact details, the language they work in, where they're based, etc., etc. So now let's go back to the home page quickly. Great. So that's it for the first kind of overview of the system if you are not logged in. Right? So any one of you can access the portal tonight and run the same type of analysis. Now we're going to be creating an account together, and we're going to suggest that you are this Colombian mango producer who wants to get onto the network. I want to show you a little bit the steps that are required. So you have to create a user account. You enter first name, last name, Bruce is under pressure. That usually doesn't happen, you see, but that's the beauty of live presentations. Okay? So we've got that system to make sure that we don't get too many fake accounts. Because as you'll see, we actually quality check all of the data and all of the accounts that actually get onto the network. So that saves us quite a lot of work. So Bruce created a fake account making use of a yacht mailbox. He's going to go to it. An email has been sent to him. He's going to click and complete the registration. He's going to set his password. And click on create. Then he's setting up his account. And this is really where we're kind of targeting and focalizing on the type of users we're dealing with. And that's where we're going to be making some specific features and functionalities available to the user. So if you click on the business role, we've got different systems available for primary production, so farmers, let's say, processing and manufacturing types of users, traders and retailers, trade support institutions, and governments. If you were to select primary production, we'll return a little blurb that tells them this is the type of information you'll be able to do. If you select the second option, Bruce, or maybe don't, just show it, processing manufacturing, we actually inform the user that they'll be able to create their own network. So what I was just showcasing earlier on, the kind of public network, users making use of the platform can also create their own network. They can invite their own beneficiaries. They can import the data of their own producers, let's say, and they can decide whether or not they make this information public onto the network or whether they keep it strictly private for their own use. So I'm going to take a primary production because I'm that mango producer, remember. Click on next. We're going to, don't worry about putting the name of the company. We're going to select the country, let's say Colombia. Select the product, so we're going to go for the mango. Size of the company, I'm a small company, micro, sorry. And that's where we have different partner affiliation. So this is yet another crossroad into the system. And we have custom platforms. So by default, you can end up on the sustainability map, but as was mentioned earlier on, we also have partnerships with an LBCS platform, or GS1 Colombia Lorica. So this is where if you say that you're an LBCS user, we're only going to be asking you questions that are specific to the sustainability assessment of LBCS. LBCS can customize their questionnaire. You can also customize the profile of the farmer's data you want to be collecting. So I'm going to select no affiliation. I'll just go the generic version. And I'm going to begin the journey. And here you're on your own dashboard, your own kind of Facebook, LinkedIn page you get to, where you can update your profile and information. By default, you can see that the first message that comes up is that your profile is currently private. We don't share the information unless farmers really say we're willing to do it. And there are a couple of warnings that come up before that. You can see two profile and assessment boxes, which are the kind of two main streamlines that the users can follow. They can either click on edit profile, edit the information, or click on take an assessment. Bruce, maybe I'm going to ask you to log in with an existing account. We're not going to go through the process of entering all the information as we have just done. We've done it already just to show you what a real account potentially looks like. Okay, so there we spent 10 minutes this morning filling in the data, and I'm going to take you through the various components. So here you're on your home. You can see that I've made the profile public. Whenever it goes from private to public, information is quality checked by ITC. We want to make sure that the data that is entered is indeed valid. Otherwise, we'll come up with very weird information in the system. Let's be frank. So if you click on the company, this is the type of information we can be collecting, okay? Description, country of operation, exactly the same type of information we were showcasing under the public profile we were showcasing earlier. If you click on production, we currently have entered information about one product, cocoa, but you can click on add a new product, and provide a product name, product variety, grade, quality, description. You have a whole array of information that you can enter into the system to, at the end of the day, make the profile of your business or company attractive to potential buyers. You can have the location. So if you click on the location, you can drop a pin for where your company is located, scroll down a bit, create a new field by clicking on Add a New Asset. You can select a location type. So you can say, I want to register a field. What's the production that's on it? Cocoa, because that was the only product I had in the system. What's the certification? Fair Trade International, Colombia, etc. And then you can, this is the feature where you can actually draw the outline of a given field and drop a map. And you can have multiple fields that are being attached to your profile. And here we're working very closely with Lorica and GS1 Colombia in order to assign unique IDs to every single field of the given producers. And Vivian will tell you a little more about this in just a few minutes. Then you can go on to the assessment, Bruce. No need to say that. And you can click on Take a New Assessment. So this is maybe where you wanted to become BioSwiss certified. So you can actually scroll through the list, select any standard, Bruce, it's okay, just for presentation purposes. Scroll up. And based on your existing certification, so Fair Trade International, if you scroll down a bit, you can see that in our system, based on the calculations, you're pretty much 76% aligned to the requirements of BioSwiss. There again, you're going to have to quality check it, right? But we do a first kind of pre-fill of the questionnaire for you based on your existing certifications. And we also have the breakdown for environmental, social, economic, quality, and ethics. If you click on full assessment, this is where you can leverage the online feature that enables you to answer an online questionnaire based on the question of a standard or a generic question and based on the specific requirements of a standard. One thing that is also new as part of this new version is that we only do an assessment of one standard at a time. Before you could do it against 4 standards, which was a bit complicated and not so accurate, whereas now really focusing on one standard is much more accurate, where you get the actual question and the actual requirement that is taken back to you. So if you can go back to the homepage, Bruce. Great. So this is the dashboard of a producer. Had I entered the system saying that I was a cooperative, a processor, I would have had very different features. That's why I could have had the feature to download an application, to collect data in the field, to collect information from an export, an Excel file, and import it into the system. So this is the new sustainability map. I'm going to stop my presentation here. I'm going to invite Vivian to come on stage to do a little 5-minute testimonial about our work with Lorica, and then we will open up the floor for 10-15 minutes for questions and answers. Vivian.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Vivian Rangel. As Greg told you, I work in Lógica. Lógica is a business association based in Bogota. And we work to promote sustainable supply chains through collaboration and the use of standards for logistics primarily. So how many of you are familiar with barcodes? Everyone, no? Everyone has been in a supermarket and we are all consumers. So barcodes, the code associated with this graphical representation is one of the GS1 standards. So, for example, there is a GS1 Switzerland, there is a GS1 Colombia. Every country in the world, almost 150 countries, has a GS1 office. So we work with these standards, for product identification, and the other standard is the GLN that Gregory told you about. Is a specific standard for locations. It means global location number. So that way, similar to products, you have a number, and you can be sure that it's not other exact number in anywhere in the world. The same happens with the GLN. So you won't find any same GLN around the world. It's a way to identify locations in this case. So for this, we have been recognized by companies in Colombia as a neutral partner. So they have trusted us to work on collaborative efforts to improve efficiency across supply chains. So as an ITC partner for the implementation of this platform, our first achievement was a partnership or an agreement with the Colombian Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. So they helped us to gather information of farmers from different supply chains, and also to connect with different farmers associations. So that way, we made to assign more than 33,000 different GLNs. So that means the same number of different farms across the country. So this has been the starting point for bigger local efforts to train, for example, to train farmers in the use of these standards, because most of the farmers don't know what is a barcode, what is a GLN, or which could be the best practices for their logistics. So in less than 9 months, we have been able to train more than 1,400 farmers directly in their villages or in their farms, with a small group of consultants from Lógica. So it has been a really marathonic effort, because as you saw on the map, the farmers can be in the middle of nowhere. Just that's it. So it can take us 1 day to get there, 2 hours on a motorcycle, or 1 hour walking or something like that. And it has been really interesting effort. So along with that, we have developed a virtual training course related with sustainable logistics for food systems. So this course is aimed to deliver knowledge and basic concepts related with logistics, with traceability, with the standards, because these GS1 standards, the barcodes, as we know them, can be used to trace the product from the farmer to the final consumer. Okay, so it's a way to open them a new market, for example, the retailers. So now they have access. Each farmers, we are given each farmer three numbers or 3 codes, 3 barcodes to identify their products, so they can be able to sell their products on, for example, retailers or to international markets. So far, more than 600 farmers have taken this virtual course, and we hope that by the end of the year we can reach 1,000 farmers. And related with GLNs, with the allocation of GLNs, we have allocated, as I told you, 33,000 GLNs. So we hope that by the end of the year we can reach more than 50,000 GLNs so far. So that's what we have been working on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vivian. So now we're going to open up the floor to questions and answers. Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Andreas Stamm. I'm working with the German Development Institute.
Can some, yeah, because some people might not hear you right at the back.
Was not my plan to go on stage, but just one brief question. I'm working Andreas Stamm from the German Development Institute, and I'm very interested. I've worked a lot with other tools of ITC, like the trade map and so on. My main question is, who are the expected clients of this website? As a researcher who has dealt with sustainability issues for the last 25 years, I will love it. I will use part of your bandwidth probably. But just make a mini scenario. If I'm, let's say, a procurement officer I'm working on public procurement, so that's my question. If I'm the procurement officer of a big hospital in, let's say, Munich, and I want to buy mango juice for my patients and for my business, for my lunch rooms, and I want to be this mango certified for organic and labor issues, so no child labor and organic mango. And I also want to know who in Germany can provide this mango juice, because I will not travel to Colombia, even if I would love to, but I can't for budget and for time reason. So can you help this public procurement officer in this field? So who can offer mango juice that is sustainably produced and has no child labor and organic production? Yeah. And who are the intermediaries whom I can approach?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. So I think we can help you with some of this question, but not everything. So essentially you could use the network in order to run a query saying I'm looking for mango juice, coming from Colombia, certified organic. Then hopefully in time we will have companies with their profiles that are made available onto the system. Now you could reach out to those companies directly, but it's not that simple, of course. Now, second thing is we could not give you information yet as to who would be retailing information from those businesses in Germany. That's not something we're doing right now. We're doing a little pilot project in Geneva with a coffee barista. You know, that's kind of looking at the network, trying to identify interesting coffee producers, testing the coffee as well, and potentially selling it in his shop with the QR code of the company at the back of the coffee package, so to speak. So we're not there yet. We have the platform that enables visibility for that juice company, because there again we do not only do small mango producers, but we can also have profiles for processors onto the system. Yeah. Can someone walk with the mic? Madison? Or?
Have the mic if you want.
Okay, let's just.
Just one question about the benchmarking analysis. Do you have any validation process among the standard setting organizations? I'm trying to understand, for example, if I say this criteria, let's say biodiversity is in rainforest lines and in fair trade insane. Me as a user, I'm going to use that logic and say, okay, if I apply it here, fair trade and rainforest lines are going to be happy with me. But do they agree that that benchmark is fine?
So I'm going to take this question first, and then I'll turn to the standard guru, Matthew, to see whether he wants to add anything else onto this, because I'm not into standards per se. I'm much more into the development of these platforms, but I've been in standards for a while. Essentially, the information that we provide in the standards module is neutral. We don't rank standards. We don't make any value judgment or whatsoever. Okay? It's very much up to the user to make use of the information, or third parties or researchers, whoever they are, to make the potential judgment themselves. But we ourselves, when we put the standards side by side with a criteria pertaining to biodiversity, we're not saying this is equivalent to that. There's no hard wiring, hard coding that takes place. We just provide the means, the transparency tool to enable the users to make that informed decision. Maestro, any other feedback?
No, this is correct. Just to remember, this is standards map. This is not standards evaluation or benchmark. So you map the criteria against an ITC database that codes the data biodiversity standard A and B. And then, of course, it is not us to say this is equivalent. So if the standards have a mutual recognition agreement, that would be displayed in the processes and in the modus operandi of the standards. We are mapping them against the grid, which is made of those 1,000 criteria of the standards map. But it's a mapping.
Yes? Yes, sure.
So I've been trading soft commodities 24 years, and I've seen sometimes some certification that are, first of all, self-certifying themselves. So sometimes you have a certification that is not even ISO standard, and an independent supervision company cannot certify it. And I've seen also on your criteria, for me it's a little bit the advertising of those certification companies. For example, if Fairtrade is certifying, let's say, roses from a region where there is drought and where this water should be used much more for food, is it Fairtrade or is it... No, let's be serious. In terms of sustainability, it's not sustainable, because sustainability means to make sure that the goods are produced where it makes sense, how it makes sense, and what makes sense. And in that case, the roses doesn't make sense. So on your criteria, do you have the legal requirement that can be certified by an independent supervision company according to the ISO standards, or is it only the criteria of those companies labeling a premium? And as a trader, sometimes I'm wondering why to pay a premium for something that should just be legal.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. And there again, we're not making any value judgment on these standards, but having information is better than having no information at all. So, you know, whenever we conduct trainings in the field, we've been to I don't know how many countries, and somebody is asked, an avocado producer, to become fair trade certified, you might say, okay, but he doesn't know what it entails. Making use of the system, you do understand what they would need to do or not do. And trust us, you know, we never go into trainings and say, you should do this, you should do that. We're just there to provide the information. And how many times have we done self-assessments in fair trade? We have a room of 25 companies, they all engaged. After question 1, question 2, question 3, after question 21, they're like, okay, that's not for me. It's too complex. So at least we provide some information, but some will be engaged, some will want to do it. So we're not saying whether fair trade is okay in areas where there's water scarcity or not. We're just providing information about what fair trade is. When it comes to national legislations, it's not something that we have yet in the system. And this is what I believe the T4SD technical working group was discussing this morning a great deal. Already just having information on those voluntary sustainability standards is hard enough. If we also have to bring in legislation, it's very hard. But at a criteria level, I believe there is an indicator that informs whether some of the requirements are based on national legislations or not. Yes? Can you try this one?
Maybe I can talk loud enough. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah.
Okay, I can do that. If you were to add national legislation to it and consider that an equivalent to a certification, I think it could be very misleading, because in many of the producing countries, the problem is the lack of resources, political will, and technical ability could assume that national labor legislation was complied with at a facility, it would cover, I don't know, probably 85% of the requirements. But most of the facilities that we look at have never been inspected by a government agency, much less was forced to follow and inspected. So that's the value, whoever asked that question, of the certification. You know that that facility has been inspected, and through some process it's been decided that they comply, not just the existence of legislation.
Yeah, no, thanks for your contribution. Yes.
Kelly from Fair Trade International. I will invite my colleague from Fair Trade Africa to clarify the importance of working in the flower sector in East Africa. But going back to the sustainability map, I really like the empowerment approach to it, to allowing producers to really have a profile online. My question would be regarding some of the issues on language. So we mentioned earlier in previous sessions the challenge of being English-based. I don't know if the map is available in other languages.
Yeah, it's a very good point. We've just
and the second question is regarding decertification. So in terms of fake news, somebody already mentioned, so if somebody wants to use, beef up their profile and say they are certified X, Y, and Z, or if they were, but they did not comply to X, Y criteria, and now they're decertifying, how is this map really accurate in updating the trends?
It's a really good question. So when it comes to languages, we've literally just finished the map. So it's only available in English. By the end of next month, we'll have it in Spanish. And then by the end of the year, hopefully, we'll have it in French. And I know that Joe was in China recently talking about potentially expanding the languages of the system, you know. When it comes to the validity of the data, this, of course, is our main concern. You know, because if we have data that is not true, that is not valid, that is fake, then the system has no use. This is one of the reasons why we quality check the profiles before they go online. The moment someone clicks on, say, I want to go public, we actually review this information, we get a notification, and we can see whether or not, you know, it's a Chinese company trying to sell some metal pipes, and they've done 1,500 profiles on the system. But only the certification, you actually need to upload proof. You need to upload some kind of information, some kind of information that would enable us to see that indeed the claim that they are making is valid.
Could I ask a follow-on to that same question, though? At least in our system, and I suspect in many of the standard systems, we have experienced significant numbers of times forged certificates. So looking at their certificate will not tell you whether it's really a certificate. Some of our systems, of course, then will list everybody who's certified and whose certification is current. Do you check back with either the certification bodies or the standards organizations to verify that the certificates are authentic?
Yes. So this is
That's great if you do that.
But actually,
it's a lot of work.
This is part of the plan of, as much as we are checking the data on the standards map regarding the content requirements and modus operandi of the standards, we have those updates of all the information directly done with the standards organizations, which are checking that the content of their standards is accurate on the standards map. When it comes to now the new launch of this network, the idea is to expand this collaboration we have with each of those 238 standards to ensure that they receive regularly, like on a quarterly basis and at the minimum on an annual basis, list of our users having claimed that they are certified and saying these are all their QRs or links to the system where we can actually align databases of our users and theirs. And this is the only plan we have and only way we think we can cross-check information.
This is fantastic. When you find a false certificate, do you have a system to report that to some responsible authority in the country?
The only responsible authority we would have as a liaison at the moment would be the standard organization. ideas most welcome in terms of reporting back to other types of authorities. But at the very minimum, all partners in building standards maps since 2009 have been the standards organizations. Those are the partners without which we would not be here today. And so we are building on this collaboration. If we end up dealing with the certification bodies themselves, perfect. But at the minimum, we want to keep our stakeholders pleased, the standards organizations. Thank you.
Maybe one last question before we move on to the next panel. Yes, please.
First, let me say that this is good work. My question is, as a produce organization, before I decide whether I want to go for fair trade certification or rainforest, etc., is this map going to be able to help me to find out who are the fair trade buyers or the RA buyers out there?
No. It's not. We're not there yet. Again, you know, we'd love to be there in a few years. The information that we have, the market data, is very much supply side. You know, so we provide information about what is the production of fair trade. That being said, we have a project, an ongoing project with the European Commission to actually provide some demand side information. So in the next year, few years, who knows, we'll actually have information about companies who are willing to actually purchase fair trade products.
Maybe just to complement on that, don't forget about the two ways users will be creating user accounts. Either yourself, you self-registering into the system as a farmer, cooperative, company, buyer or seller, and creating a profile, or you are inviting your own suppliers. Taking the example of Swiss companies like Nestlé, inviting some of their suppliers for some of their products and ingredients, inviting their own suppliers to their own private network, in the network, but all anonymized from a public perspective, and inviting back to the farmers or cooperatives. So there will be cascading down and up in the network. And of course, by the time users are created, we will have more data flows and companies putting their profile publicly. I'm a potential buyer, I'm a potential seller. Want to meet?
Joe, we're running out of time, so very quick question.
Yeah, it's really quick. Congratulations, guys. Really amazing. Super, super impressed.
Just would like to understand, why do you think the standards organizations themselves haven't done something like this? Maybe they haven't, I don't know. But why are you doing it for them?
Well, I guess it's a competitive world. And standards organizations have also their own business model to run, even if they are not for profit. We are offering here not a full solution, but a partial solution, where we can bring small SMEs and actors directly into more visibility. We give them a voice. We don't offer the full package. Standards organizations have a great deal to make with trainings, capacity building, and we are just more than happy to collaborate with them.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, yeah. I'm going for replacing battery again. I'll give you whatever you want to say.
Which is the certification body that has certified against, let's say, an oats or an organic something? Yes, this is part of the profile when the cooperative or the farmer sets up and says, yes, I have this certificate, and they have to mention from whom, they have to mention the validity and the date it was issued. Okay. But the question about decertification was very good, because you may have a certificate, if you lose it, how do you update the profile? Probably they will not, and that is up to us to do. Okay. One thing, on the identify, you see we have done what we have promised. We have public international standards. In the international, if you click on it, we have the OECD guidelines, we have ILO conventions.
So ladies and gentlemen, please remain in the room, because we'll be starting our panel session in just about 5 minutes once we get set up for the chairs. Okay, thank you.
Do you have a new Secretary General? You know, maybe things somehow.
But let me know how we can connect. Okay. How we can
with this one and the public forum.
Yeah, how we will make many. I forgot to mention. Yes.
People here yesterday. Of course. The audience. It's a lot of purely concerned. the system.
If you want to talk, we will have tons of webinars, but we can have a specific one.
Let me know whether
Thank you.
it seems to. So we're happy. We're not. And also there's this non-temptation of sneaking out, so shopping between the two. There's too far. I will come back to you in email. I've just been
We have to talk.
Yes, now or
I don't know how long is the break.
I don't think so. There's any break.
Oh, there's no break. Okay. Look,
The link, let's say, trend towards services and servitization becomes
It was really interesting to be there. Young see the 45 between the two.
We have
so much
excellent bunch of people. You had my emails and everything. The idea was like a year's worth of training. Each one would take
Nobody knows. Yeah, exactly. Which makes very sense. Here as well, we had two very interesting days with cases and group questions they're asking. They were seem to know where to talk freely about what's happening in the relationship with the not easy. That's what I have to probably do now. I can at least I'm sure they know I've been there, so even if it's on my unit. So I'll still have to declare next time I continue as I've been there. I'll probably have to go and speak to the mission on why I was there. I don't know if I will come back to this for the next 10 years. But it's okay. Yeah, exactly. Compared to what was just against the last it's a bit challenge. But back to this is going well. I'll unfortunately have to sneak out for a few minutes now because I'm trying to manage a lot of different things at the same time. Do you know each other? Peter from CI. First institute. We have been working together with you for the last many years. I registered and yet they couldn't find me. Yeah.
It's some one-pager.
She's up in Ulimata. Sometimes she's here, but she's upstairs. Can I bring her? Sure. She's from TPU. Yes, we have we've been giving scholarship. I think system. So as I have to go to the office anyhow, I can bring her on Bernard, I will come back, but unfortunately we have to. I'll call you. Yeah, next week, but I'm totally focused.
Good to see you again.
We have to push them to take out some.
Okay, I think we're going to start our penultimate panel of the afternoon. If you could, he's here. He's here. He's talking to Where's that cowbell?
No. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's very challenging.
That's good.
Yeah, I hope I
Okay.
can meet the expectations.
This is part of your learning.
Yeah, that's for me.
Yeah.
Really trying to use that. How would you put together a much more structured course?
Good.
So we're all kind of feeling our way.
Excellent. Yeah.
It's the Swiss way here. Okay. All right, so we'd like to begin the second to last panel session of the afternoon, which is a presentation of the joint ITC European University Institute new research work that was just published this week on social and environmental standards, from fragmentation to cooperation. So we have three presenters today. We have the authors of the report, in fact. We have Philip Schleifer, Assistant Professor of Transnational Governance from the University of Amsterdam. We have Matteo Fiorini, Research Associate in the Global Governance Program at EUI in Florence. And we have our own Regina Tamasova, a T4SD staff member, who also has participated in writing the report. And also we're happy to have Patrick Mallet of ISEAL as a discussant. So just before I turn the floor to our panelists, just to give you a bit of background in terms of the work that ITC has engaged in with EUI over the past now, it's been over 2 years. So we have been working with EUI to really leverage in a different way, if you will, the robust and richness of the data in the T4SD database. So we have been discussing this in the past with EUI. How do we leverage this data? How do we run econometric analyses using the information in the database to really draw some conclusions, to test some hypotheses? And we actually did the first iteration of this work in 2016. So we published an initial analysis back last year, which really looked at how these standards are organized from a perspective of their systems, if you will. What underlies their systems, and how do those systems, if you will, look, or what kind of generalizations and conclusions we can make from those in terms of assistance to producers, to users of standards, geographic location and spread of standards. And a lot of the information was quite useful, and it was also discussed in various fora, both at the ISEAL conference and at other conferences throughout the year. So we actually wanted to expand that analysis and expand the work this year in 2017. So we actually have now looked at, in terms of the number of standards that are part of the analysis, we have now increased from about 80 standards, I think, originally, to now, I think, more than 100 that are in the database. And looking today at the issue of fragmentation. So how do we characterize standards in terms of overlap, in terms of criteria, in terms of sector specification, and what does this tell us? What are the implications of that? So I think the data has been very useful, not only for us at ITC in terms of how we approach our work in the field, how we engage with the standards organizations, but I think also from a lot of perspectives in terms of research, from a public policy perspective as well, it has been very useful. So I really would like to welcome our colleagues and friends back to ITC today to discuss this report, and then after they present their findings of the fragmentation analysis, then we'll open it up to Q&A to get your feedback, impressions, and also just overall questions on the implications of the data. Just a note: after this panel session, we'll have a final coffee break, and then looking at my program here at just before 4 p.m. we'll start the last session, which is the 10YFP 10-year framework of programs panel. And just about the 10YFP panel, there is some information that has been provided by UN Environment in the back of the room at the table, and if you could consult that, during the coffee break, or bring it with you back to your chairs, so you'll have it for the session at 4 p.m. or 15:45. That will be very useful. Okay, or sorry, the session starts at 15:45. 16:45. Sorry, there's a mistake there in the program. All right, thank you very much, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Joe. So we start the presentation with the outline of what we will be covering today. So first of all, we'll speak about the standards map database, which served as Joe said, that's the main source for our research. We'll go briefly through the standards landscape, research focus on central questions, and we'll focus more on the methodology, main results and findings of the empirical analysis, and we'll conclude with the coordination tools that we find useful for the field of sustainability standards. So, the data source for our research is the standards map database. So as you saw from the previous presentation, the standards map database, the standards map website itself has now become part of a bigger umbrella tool that is called sustainability map. So, but you still can use and see all the data on standards. So the standards map itself was launched some time ago in 2011, and currently we have information on more than 230 voluntary sustainability standards. So we collect information on different standard systems, such as standards developed by NGOs, by private companies, such as audit protocols and codes of conduct, standards or sets of criteria developed through the social movements, for instance. So the type of data that we collect in the standards map database is really diverse. So we have 2 dimensions of data. So the first dimension of data is what we call requirements. So basically we collect data on various indicators, criteria, KPIs of standards, whatever word they wish for their standard documents. And the second dimension of data is what we call processes. So here we collect data on various processes such as auditing and certification processes, traceability, governance, standard setting, claims and labeling, etc., etc. So also for each standard we collect information on which countries the standard is covering, meaning that in which countries the standard operates, certifies or verifies producers, and of course which product a specific standard covers. So first we looked at the landscape of the standards. So on this graph you can see the number of standards created per year. So the bars correspond to the number of standards created per year as per standards map database. So, and of course the general trend is that the number of standards has been increasing, and actually the largest increase of standards happened between 1990 and 2010. So we calculated that on average every year during this period there were 8 new standards created. Okay, so of course there are different reasons for the number of standards growing. It is, of course, the internationalization of global value chains. So companies nowadays, they source products from all over the world, from suppliers that are located in different countries. Another reason is insufficient government-led regulation of transnational production that was taken up by this market-driven mechanism of voluntary sustainability standards. It is also development in information technologies. So today companies can monitor their supply chains through IT technologies and through the use of this type of standards. And the last but not least is the growing importance of environmental norms in the international agenda. So overall, the increasing number of standards has led to actually their proliferation and fragmentation, meaning that there are, in some sectors and some markets, there are many standards operating. So this leads to kind of their proliferation. So we also looked at the types of standards. So standards are really kind of a phenomenon. This voluntary sustainability standards are kind of phenomenon in the field of standards. These are really like market-driven mechanism or instrument to tackle sustainability issues in the supply chains. And there's no kind of single governing body that would tell what are the rules of setting the standards. That's why standard setting organizations, they can get as creative as possible when setting the standards and kind of including the interests of those groups that develop the standards. So in this table you see we try to kind of formalize the standards. So we included the private sector driven standards, civil society driven standards, and standards driven by collaborative arrangement. So within a private sector driven standards, we also identified like single actor systems such as Unilever's Sustainable Agriculture Code. This is a really firm driven code. There are also multi-actor systems in the private sector such as Global Gap driven by the retailers. There are civil society driven systems such as like Rainforest Alliance or Clean Clothes Campaign, and collaborative arrangement systems such as Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil. As for the research focus and central questions, so as I mentioned, fragmentation has really become a phenomenon or an issue, if you will. Also during the discussions yesterday, we've heard the word fragmentation several times from the participants. So, and this is the research that we wanted to devote to this kind of phenomenon. So we looked at what are the most fragmented markets. Is fragmentation the same in different markets, or is it different? We also wanted to see what is the level of fragmentation for different sectors and sustainability hotspots such as social and environmental issues. And we also looked at what are the coordination tools to address the issue of fragmentation. So in a nutshell, in this paper, we are not looking at what causes this fragmentation, but rather giving a snapshot using the standards map data on what is actually the state of fragmentation in different markets.
Cool. So let me tell you a bit about the ingredients of our analysis. The first key ingredient is a definition of fragmentation that we can bring to the data. And we adopted a very simple general approach, defining fragmentation of the standards landscape as a situation of multiplicity, redundancies and gaps and contradictions between standards operating in the same market. Now, a second very important ingredient, a second very important ingredient is how do we define these markets? How do we look at the data? And we define the market in terms of a pair. First element is a commodity and the second element is a country. So for us, a market will be coffee in Uganda or soy in Brazil. Within these markets, we will do our empirical assessment of the level of fragmentation. We will consider 9 key agricultural commodities, which are listed in this slide: bananas, cocoa, coffee, cotton, forestry, palm oil, soy, sugarcane, and tea. And for each of these, we selected the top 10 producers around the world. So in the case of coffee, for example, you see in this map the top 10 producers which will be included in our analysis. So you have Brazil with almost 3 million tons of coffee produced in 2013. So for each of the 9 commodities, we select 10 top producers, and we have a framework that consists of 90 markets, commodity country markets. Now, with this perspective on the data, we want to operationalize our definition of fragmentation. We want to bring this concept of fragmentation to the data. In order to do that, we ask 3 basic questions to the data. The first one is how many systems are operating in a commodity country market. The answer to that question will provide a first assessment of the degree of fragmentation in each market, in each commodity country market. And that will be the dimension that we use in this presentation for the interest of time. But we ask a second question, which is how different are the systems operating in the country product market in terms of their requirements? How heterogeneous are the requirements which producers will have to comply with in a specific country product market? And we do this analysis of requirements heterogeneity both across and within the sustainability hotspots, which are dimensions of activity of the systems, environmental, social, management, quality, and ethics. And finally, we will ask the data how different are the processes of the voluntary sustainability systems operating in a commodity country market. These 3 dimensions will allow us to have a comprehensive but also very concrete assessment of the degree of fragmentation in these markets, in these commodity country markets. And let me give you some of the key findings that we have in this report. So fragmentation is a very debated topic, but this is one of the first one of the first research that gives a very concrete angle on this topic. And considering just the first dimension, so how many systems are operating in a country commodity cell, we identify in this figure, we have the top 5 country product markets in terms of numbers of systems operating in there. And you see soy in Brazil. If you are a producer and you are operating in the soy sector in Brazil, you have to face the landscape, which consists of 21 voluntary sustainability standards. These systems potentially ask to comply with a very different set of requirements. Their processes are different, and therefore this creates an environment, a very fragmented environment. You also have other countries for which soy emerges as one of the most fragmented sector. Argentina, 17 systems operating in there. China, soy, 15 systems. Then you have coffee in Peru with 15 systems, and 14 systems for tea in Indonesia. So fragmentation can indeed be a problem, but we also find that there are markets where fragmentation is not at all a problem. And this, again, is the comparative advantage of our perspective, which is very concrete and based on the standards met data. We find that in some country product markets, like cotton in Australia, bananas in China, it's a very clear environment in terms of certification, in terms of the standards landscape. Only one system is operating there. Now, this evidence comes from a database which is not perfectly comprehensive of the real scenario, but it's a good approximation of complex markets with high degree of fragmentation and markets with very low degree of fragmentation. Let me quickly tell you a bit about other key findings that we have in the report. The first one is that with a higher number of voluntary sustainability systems in a country product market is associated with higher heterogeneity, higher diversity in the requirements that producers have to comply with and in the processes that are adopted by the system. So again, if you operate in a market, if you are a producer in a market, in a commodity country market with many systems, you will have to face a more fragmented landscape in terms of requirements and in terms of processes. And this emerges because of potential competition among systems which want to differentiate from one another. And if a producer has to comply with more than one standard, this diversity, this heterogeneity will definitely create a problem. The second key finding that I want to highlight today is that we actually find that food sectors are more fragmented. Again, doing some speculation on this fact that comes out of the data, we recognize that the food sectors are probably those where consumer demand was more pressing and probably fostered the highest, increased the highest proliferation in systems, and therefore competition and therefore fragmentation. The last finding is that we actually have less fragmentation when we look at requirements pertaining to the social dimension of sustainability. And this we find it very interesting, and a way to rationalize, a way to explain this finding is that when you look at the social dimension, you have some very big players which are very influential, like the ILO. And what you see in this chart, the green bar tells you the share of systems in the database that explicitly make a reference to the ILO core conventions. And you see that more than 50% of these systems recognize in the ILO a reference. Therefore, this creates a sort of homogeneity within the context of the social hotspots and reduces fragmentation. And I leave it to Philip for the last one.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matteo. So, linking to this last finding, another question that we looked at in the report was actually the question how to reduce fragmentation. And in this context, we discussed coordination as one possible strategy to achieve this. And here on the slide you see the definition of how we defined coordination in this report. So here a process of increasing the interoperability of standard systems in order to make them work together more smoothly and efficiently. And we also looked at various coordination instruments, or we identified different coordination instruments. Specifically, we looked here at information exchange, benchmarking, as well as mutual recognition and harmonization. So these were the instruments that we discussed. And we actually found that there's already quite a few things happening among standards along those dimensions. And I just want to briefly give you a few examples of those. So when we look at information exchange, we found that there are already quite a few forums and events which have been institutionalized over the last couple of years, in which information exchange and dialogue over voluntary standard systems is taking place. Here on the slide I have a few examples. Obviously there is the Trade for Sustainable Development Forum here at the ITC. Another very important event which you all know is ICIL's Global Standard Sustainability Conference, and very importantly also obviously the United Nations Forum on Sustainability Standards, which was formally launched in 2013 and which really has developed into a venue in which critical discussion and reflection about voluntary standards is taking place, is happening. And we actually find that in all of these forums and events, fragmentation is actually a topic which is very high on the agenda. We believe that this is actually a first step to tackle, address the problem. But there's more going on. There are also a number of benchmarking initiatives now
So these are instruments or initiatives which systematically compare the content of these standards, the processes of these standards. This is really important for the users of these systems. It makes it easier for them to decide which of these systems or standards best fits their purposes. And in other words, these benchmarking initiatives can help actually to bring down search and information costs for certification users. And this is actually one of the problematic outcomes of highly fragmented markets, that search and information costs become very high. So again, a few examples for this. One is the Sustainability Standards Comparison Tool, a joint initiative of GIZ, ISEAL, and the ITC. There's also an interesting initiative, is the Global Rules for Sustainable Farming project. So here an initiative which benchmarks voluntary agricultural standards against the United Nations REDD+ program. The goal here is to increase the interoperability and to better fight commodity-driven deforestation. And there are many more or other benchmarking initiatives now, obviously also the ITC standards map on which this report, or the data that we used also for this report, came from that particular initiative. Now, turning to the level of standards, we also see that there are more and more efforts between standards to better coordinate their activities. This can, for example, take the form of mutual recognition and harmonization. And again, I just wanted to mention a few examples here. Very prominently, earlier this year, two major certification programs for agricultural commodities, which you all probably know. The Rainforest Alliance and UTZ announced that they will merge their operations. And one of the main reasons they actually cited for this was to reduce duplication and to increase efficiency in this area. Very interesting also in this context, the collaboration between Proterra and the Roundtable on Responsible Soy. These are two of the world's leading soy standards, and they have announced that they will now work together in the area of auditing. I think this is interesting in particular, as we have seen that the soy industry or the soy sector seems to have really a problem when it comes to proliferation and fragmentation of standards. Overall, however, our review suggests that coordination remains the exception rather than the rule, and that there are still many barriers that remain that often make coordination between standards difficult. For example, one reason is a political conflict or conflicts that exist in this field, for example, between civil society actors or industry actors or actors from developed or developing countries over the content of these standards and the design of these systems. So these conflicts can become an obstacle for systems to collaborate. Also important, and I think very relevant for this report, is that there's still a lack of information. So we still have little systematic information about the structure of sustainable markets and the state of fragmentation in these markets and what exactly that means. We know relatively little about successful coordination strategies and ways to overcome obstacles in these areas. And finally, we also have to acknowledge the fact that coordination is simply costly. It takes time, it requires organizational resources, and these factors also make it difficult for standard systems to coordinate. Nonetheless, we believe that it is an important issue on the agenda, and I think many of you will agree. And I think there are also things that can be done about it. And in particular, if we look at lack of information, that is something that can be tackled relatively easily. And here this study, in a way, is one step in this direction by really trying to systematically bring together data on the structure of these markets and to get a good or better measure of how fragmentation plays out in these markets. But ultimately, it is also clear that this continues to be a problem and that much remains to be done. And I think the important question is here really how to better promote coordination among standard systems. And actually this is also a question that I would very much like to throw back to you. I know we have a lot of experience here in the room, so we would also be very curious to hear from you, your thoughts on this issue, maybe also some of the experience that you had or have in this area. Yeah, thank you very much.
Great, so I'm just going to take a couple of minutes because we are constrained a little in our the time we have. I do want to provide some responses. This is a great position for me. I basically get to respond to all the hard work that's been done. I don't have to do anything myself. I see the hands are already going up. Absolutely. Let me just, as you're thinking about what questions you might want to ask, we're going to do this in two ways. One, if you have questions or comments about the research itself, the methodology, or the results, we'll take a few questions on those, and then we'll take questions on this question at the end about how to promote the coordination agenda. And of course, this has been the theme of the 2 days of meetings, so I think we've already heard a number of good ideas. So my own perspective, just to share some thoughts. First of all, I think fundamentally what's critical about this research is the emphasis on fragmentation, but its implication particularly for smallholders. And we see increasingly that certification systems are shifting from focusing on the clients, the enterprises that are closer to meeting the requirements, better able to take advantage of the systems, and now looking at the rest of the sectors in which they operate. And how do we transform sectors as a whole? I think smallholders in particular are a critical area where we haven't been able to achieve the successes we would like. Part of that is due to fragmentation. So that's just to say, very important research from that perspective. Methodologically, it's important, I think, to put this research in the context of where did we draw the data from. So it's the ITC Standards Map database. We have to recognize there's limitations to that. I read the report, one of the most interesting things, soy. Really? Is soy where we have the most standards worldwide? If you actually know a little bit about the history, there was an effort by ITC and FIFAC to do an analysis of soy producers. So if you look at the soy standards contained within Standards Map, you actually see that there's quite a number that have been brought in, including company supplier codes. Now, if you were to include company supplier codes for all the other commodities within Standards Map, I think the total numbers would change. So it's just a recognition that we're not talking about full information, but as you alluded to, a sense of where are there the most standards. I think another point, a piece of analysis, I don't know if there's further analysis to be done, would be to look at that breakdown by the type of standards. So there's a number of standards that are commodity specific, a number that are company driven. You had that breakdown at the beginning. It would be useful to see where are there a lot of company standards, for example, or where are there a lot of standards that apply to multiple crops, of which, let's say, soy is one. So that's just an idea for further analysis. In just two examples then on the coordination piece, I mean, I think this is, we have to be honest with ourselves. We've not done a good job of enhancing or improving coordination between standard systems. It's something that's at the heart of what ISEAL is about, and we find it challenging. But tools like the Standards Map, or now Sustainability Map, create at least that first step of transparency, of information about the systems and how they compare. It's just a first step. If you talk about coordination, as we talked about yesterday, very much about trust and relationships. But to have that technical understanding is a good foundation. So I think the research and the tool are useful in that regard. I think also, though, we can look at more creative ways, or maybe ways beyond what was suggested here, about how we get to coordination. And we talk a lot about benchmarking, and we're getting into the specifics of, does your standard say the same as my standard? But actually there's an interesting example. UTS, which is one of the organizations that's merging, did a coordination effort, a mutual recognition with UEBT, the Union for Ethical Biotrade, both ISEAL members. This was focused on herbal teas where they overlapped. And what they looked at was, do the intent of our standards and of our systems overlap? Is the intent consistent? And if you step away from, are the specifics what we care about, and look more at, are the sustainability outcomes what we care about, then you have much more flexibility and opportunity potentially for recognizing each other's systems. So I think that's just an interesting reflection, stepping a little bit away from the focus so much on the data, but seeing that more as a first way of identifying where are those overlaps, where are the tricky situations that we have to figure out the coordination. So those are my comments, my feedback. I would love to have a couple of hands. Let's see, we're going to go over time because we took an unexpected break beforehand, so we'll cut into the next break. We've got about 15 minutes. I want just 2 or 3 questions, ideally specifically on the methodology or the results of the research. First in the back.
Very quickly. First one comment. Standard mapping, ITC, we agree it's not a benchmarking exercise. That's what Matthew said.
And I guess it's probably about the outcome. And what I think is missing, and going back to your point, which I think is very valid, the ultimate goal of all the standards is the same. It's promoting sustainability. But we have to remember that there is what is the raison d'etre of these standards? There's a business model behind. So what I'm really trying to say here is there really willingness to have less standards? I love the idea. But we have to also understand that if we really want to have more coordination, it is possible. It's not so difficult, actually. But there has to be willingness. And I think, going back to the business model, that's an important question.
I have a question related to the methodology. That means, let's say you said you had 15 standards in a certain subject field, okay? Did you all also look into, let's say, relevance of the standard, let's say in terms of market penetration? Because if I go for certification and there's one standard which dominates, yeah, then clearly this standard is much more important than the other 14. So to treat them equally is maybe not the right approach. Did you consider this? Thanks.
And just before we answer, we'll take a couple of questions, so just back here.
Another question on methodology. Having this country and commodity pairs basically looks at this fragmentation situation for producers. But what is about the other perspective when you look at the consumers? Because they have maybe then 5 different standards from Brazil, 5 different from Indonesia, whatever. So for them, the number even piles up more. So I wanted to ask whether maybe methodology downplays a little bit the problem of fragmentation.
In fair trade, we've been trying to do a lot of benchmarks. So we've done with the RSB, with Bonsucro, and in our textile standard, we really faced a challenge where the national German authority that recognizes certification and audits, maybe Ms. Kaiser can clarify a bit, was putting a limitation in terms of trying to recognize another standard under the fair trade auditing process. So there were some legal barriers, even though there's a huge demand to try to consolidate. There are some legal barriers that we have to be made aware of that is impeding us on going forward. I don't know if this came across through the research.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much for all these really great questions. I will just try to answer a few of them. The first question was about the willingness of standards to coordinate, and I think we all agree this is an issue. I mean, it was mentioned before that there are often competitive dynamics between standards which make it difficult. I was talking about political conflicts that exist between different societal groups or industry groups that might really make coordination or deep coordination highly challenging. I think that's an important point. That's an obstacle. At the same time, I think what this study brings out very clearly as well is that
we see a lot of variation in fragmentation patterns, right? So I mean, there are industries and countries where this is an issue, where we see high levels of proliferation in certain sectors. Obviously, we have to have the caveat of the limitations of that particular data set, but I think there are some general trends or patterns that emerge. So I think it is basically here where the added value of this study is, that it basically helps us to better understand this phenomenon. And maybe I just take one more question and then I head over to Regina, which I found very interesting, that the question about legal barriers. I think that's fascinating, because the way I kind of read the literature that is out there at the moment, there's often the impression that the public sector can actually help to mitigate these problems. For example, the problem of fragmentation, or to step in and with public policy tools or legislation to actually help to make these standards, for example, producer-friendly, etc. So I think it's very interesting to hear that also the opposite can be true, so that there might also create legal barriers, for example, by limiting the ability of recognition, or the number of standards that can be recognized, which then obviously would create an obstacle to effectively reduce fragmentation. So I think that's very fascinating, and something I would definitely like to look into. Yeah.
So can I say something on the question regarding the problem of treating systems equally? And this is a problem, this is a limitation of the study. Unfortunately, we do not have information on market footprint of each system, how many producers are actually adopting one standard rather than another. This is not in the standards map, but I know there are plans to include this type of information, which will clearly boost the value of the database in itself, because we will put labels in terms of impact, importance on each of these systems. For now, this is not in there, so again, the underlying assumption which was implicit in our presentation is that all systems are treated equally.
Although anyone who was here for the last session did see Sustainability Map pulling in the data on markets, so I think that's a useful correlation.
Yeah, again, just reflecting on the market penetration and treating standards equally. So just to go into more details on the methodology, so in standards map, we collect the data on what we call geographical scope for each standard. So which means that we treat a standard covering a specific country if at least one producer is certified to the standard. That's from the producer perspective, okay? So in this sense, you see also the limitation of the analysis, so there's no kind of market footprint, as Matteo mentioned. As for the consumers, indeed, I mean, this information is extremely hard to get, extremely hard to get. So which standards consumers are facing in the market. So actually we, not long time ago, we embarked on the project that will be serving the European retailers, so we will see later on which standards are exist in the supermarkets, which products labeled to which standards are sold in the European supermarkets. So maybe based on that kind of survey, we can embark on a more detailed research. So yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to beg your indulgence. If there are a couple more questions, we'd be happy to take them, particularly any thoughts about this issue of how we support a better coordination agenda. So any final thoughts or questions? And if not, then that's fine. Okay, then with that, I'd like to thank the researchers in particular, and if you haven't already grabbed a copy, I don't know if there's any left, but they were at the back there. Enjoy your coffee break, and we'll be back.
You obviously.
This report focused on these.